Okay, so today we are going to change the gasket on the oil filter housing in a BMW Z3. So one reason that you would think you'd need to change it is you've got an oil leak, obviously, and the oil leak would be down in this section. You would see pooling down here, and then of course while you're driving you would only see the leak while you're driving. You would never see a leak while you're sitting idle, or while the car is idle. One other area that can leak is the gasket that goes on the actual cap. It gets replaced when you change the oil, but that is usually not the problem because you can put your finger around the edge and you'll see if there's any oil there. But if you look, it's really hard to see, but there is some pooling down there. Okay, so to remove the air filter, I'm gonna have to take out this nut and this one, and then there might be some more on the other side, I don't know. And you have to disconnect this hose and this clamp. First thing to do though is to remove the power from the battery, because you don't want to work on your car with the battery, and then we'll get started. So let's move on. Okay, so I took that piece off, disconnected this hose, unscrewed these two here. Now this whole unit should just lift right out. There's some cables like this that have to be removed, but that's no big deal. Now I've got it out. Might be able to see better inside there where the oil leak is happening. Okay, so it looks like I'm going to have to remove this cover, and I have to remove that'll give me more space down there so I can take the belt off. It's actually way at the bottom where I have to. Okay, so to remove this cover, there's 4 screws. One there, one here, and one there. And then the whole thing will lift right out. Now that's out of the way. Got a little bit more room. I still need to get this piece off. I think it just lifts right up. I think if I just hang on. Okay, once that's out, you have to take this housing off, and there's 2 screws. One screw here, and one screw here, and then there's a cable connector down there you need to remove, and then it'll lift right out. Now with that out of the way, you get tons of room. So to remove the belt, while you're in here, you might as well change the belts. You have to take this cap off, and you take I believe it's this cap off, and then you can then turn these tensioners so you can remove them. So here's the cap. It just pops off with a screw, and now you'll have access to that. And there's one more cap on the tensioner down here. So to get that off, once you take the cap off, you need a 16mm socket, and you just kind of pull it to the left, and then you or counterclockwise, which will loosen it up. So this is a good time to investigate your belt, see if you want to replace it, but I would recommend you replace the belt while you're in here. Okay, so once you take the cap off, there is a 16mm bolt in there, and or nut, bolt, and you need a that's counterclockwise to remove. Next, we're going to take the alternator off, and I believe there is a 16mm there and a 16mm here, and there is wiring on there, so be careful once you loosen it up because you have to unplug it from the back. I had to remove the steering fluid holder, power steering, just 2 screws right here, or actually they're not screws, they're 2 nuts. And then I can get access to this bolt right there. Okay, so with those 2 bolts removed, it's really tight, so you kind of have to pry with, you know, a wrench or something to move the alternator back, and then it'll pull right out. Okay, with the alternator loose, you have to kind of rotate it a little, and then you'll see there's 2, I'll try and do a better picture, but there's 2 nuts in there that you have to take off. They're holding the cables onto the alternator. Be careful, don't strip those, or they might start spinning. That would be bad. Okay, so you need a 10 for this bolt or nut, and or I'm sorry, a 10 for this nut, and then a, what is the other one, 14 for this one. 14 and a 10. Little tight to get out. Be careful. I got it out no problem. Okay, so now I have to take this tensioner out of the way, and I believe it's got a bolt there and a bolt there, and it's hard to see, but there's a bolt there and a bolt there. So 4 bolts take the whole thing off. Okay, so it looks like they're 13, size 13. Okay, so now once those bolts are off, get this out of the way, the whole thing just kind of rocks down. Might be a little bit hard to get it to move out of the way, but you got to pull it down, and then you'll have access in here to the bolts holding on the housing. Okay, so with the what is it, 6 bolts out, size number 10, the whole unit comes out, and it's just hanging. Now there's a cable or a electrical hook up in the back. You have to disconnect before you pull it out. It's out. Yay! There it is, completely out. And there is a spring-loaded thing with that O-ring that goes in it. See right there? So the gasket is kind of stuck and cracking on there, so you're gonna have to peel it off and then clean it all up, and then we'll put it all back together, and I'll take a few more pictures before that. You can see right back here, can't see it very well, but right back there, there's a pool of oil, right over here actually. There's a pool of oil, so that clearly shows that all the oil leak has been coming from this area here. Might have just been the O-ring in here, but you can't get in here and change the gasket without changing the O-ring. Anyway, and this is the back side, and this is where the O-ring went. That, where did I put the, oh yeah, here it is. This is some kind of gas valve, or oil valve, pressure valve, spring loaded. Nothing complicated, but there's an O-ring in there. I'll take a look and I'll take a picture of it for you. Here are the 2 parts that you need to order. That's the gasket, and there is the O-ring. So here are the parts you're going to need. You need a serpentine belt, an accessory belt, 2 O-rings, and 1 gasket. And once again, there's the part number for the accessory belt, part number for the serpentine belt, the part number for the well, it's hard to see. Well, there's the part number for the gasket. Let me take the other one out. There you go. There's the part number. Remember, 2. I'm only showing 1 in the picture, but there's actually 2 because they will go on this guy right here. And as you can see, I've already installed 1 there. The other one goes over here. Remove the bad one. I'll put the new one in. Okay, there they're both installed. And this guy goes into the engine. Right. Move this out of the way so you can see. It goes right in here like this. And it's going to fit snug now that it's got a new O-ring on it. Okay, so I take a little bit of paste. This is a high temperature grease, and I put a little bit on the gasket, and then I put a little on there, as you can see, and the gasket is now in place. The pressure relief is in correctly with both the O-rings on it, so it's all ready to go. So that'll hold it in place so we don't, damage the gasket while we put it in. So let me pause. Okay, so once you place it in, put like 1 or 2 screws in carefully. Do not, and you hand tighten all 6 screws. Remember, the 2 big ones are on the top, and the 4 little ones, 4 shorter bolts go on the bottom. So do not forget to plug in the electrical connection in the back. You have everything in. If there's any wires or anything, remember this thing slides up and down over here, the power steering rocker thing. And you're going to have a fun time trying to tighten up the bottom ones down there, these guys here. See my fingers pointing? Those are the tough ones. There's one there and there's one there because this whole thing is in the way. But hey, that's what happens when you're doing it yourself. Okay, so I got all the bolts tightened up. And then the next step is to take this power steering See how it rocks back and forth? I have to slide it back in place, and then I have to put the, well, before I do anything, I need to put the new belts on. So you can see I took all the belts off. So let me get the diagram. Okay, so here's the diagram. This is the accessory, and this is the serpentine. So we need to follow this diagram and put the belt back on. So you don't actually put it completely on yet, because you just need to get, see this this guy right here is in the way. So before you bolt it back down right here, you need to get the belt in place. So when you're ready to put it on, then you can put it on. Anyway, once I have that in place, then I can start putting this guy back, this guy right here, whoops, oh, you can't see, this guy here back into place. I have to put these bolts back in and so forth, and get the alternator back. Before you put the alternator in, you need to put these 4 bolts in, and they attach the rocker piece. They're down there. See, 1, 2, there's 3, 4. And so there's 4. You can see them in this picture. 2 in the back, 2 in the front. One's right behind this cable here. 1, 2, 3, 4. Shorter ones in the back, longer ones in the front. Don't mess up. Now let's put the alternator in. So setting the alternator sort of in place, not attaching it, and in the back, it's really hard to see, but I got the electrical in place but not attached. It's not, you know, it's just hanging there, and I have to hook the alternator has a shroud. I'll try and show it to you. This is the shroud here that kind of protects all the electrical. It slips over the plastic. You want to do that before you tighten the bolts up. One of the bolts, or actually nuts, is 10 millimeter. The other one is a half on mine. So one's metric, one's not. Good luck. After you get the cables on, then we can put the, so get the, remember the 2 long bolts? One goes on the bottom, one goes on the top. They're not quite lined up yet, but once I get them lined up, I will tighten them up, and then I can now put on the serpentine belt. So let me line them up. It's a little bit tight fit, but might take a little bit of elbow grease. It goes up around the alternator, back around, down. And then the tensioner is this guy here. It takes a 16 millimeter. I put a socket in there, extension. You have to move the steering wheel thing out of the way. I put a pipe on it, and then with the pipe, a little leverage, you can pull it and loosen it all up, get all the belt lined up, and you are good to go. Everything is tensioned and it's in. So that's the top. They call that the serpentine belt. So my serpentine belt looks good. Nice and tight. If this thing ends up squeaking, oh, look at that, I made a mistake. This belt is supposed to go underneath the bottom, so I gotta take it off. No big deal. I got the bar. I'll do it and show you more. Okay, now the belt is on correct. Goes down around, this here is the steering wheel. Power steering, goes up, alternator, back under this tensioner, back around. This is the crankshaft, or actually I don't know what this is, must be for the valves. And the crankshaft's down here in the bottom, up and around the tensioner. This is the tensioner that is spring loaded, and then back around, and then back. Anyway, looks good. Okay, so got the caps back on. Now, I've already plugged this one in, but you got to plug in this electrical before you start to put in all of this area here, because we don't want to, you know, we want to have as much room as we can. I can now put the power steering in and bolt that in. It's hard to do this while I'm watching the camera. Anyway, I will continue. Okay, so now we put the radiator fan in. Slides back in over here. And then there's 2 screws, 1 screw on that side and 1 screw on this side. So I got the fan in, put the hose back in. I started to put in the air cleaner, air filter, and you have to hook up this hose here. Make sure you route this electrical back underneath. Got to hook up this up, and then I need to put in the intake, air intake, and then we have to fasten these 2 nuts, and we're almost done. Almost done. Got it all in. Got the intake on, put the cover on, bolted that on. Make sure all these cables are plugged in. This one's plugged in. The hose is plugged in. There was a hose back here that needs to be plugged in. This one's plugged in. Right here, these are secured. So I'm almost ready. I just got to hook up the battery and then let it rip. Well, let's see what happens. Battery hooked up, car's running. Check for leaks. Make sure you didn't forget any tools. Any leaks. Let's take a look under here. I don't see any leaks. No dripping. Well, there's some old drips. Nothing new. I'm gonna drive it around the block, clean it up. We're all done. I hope you enjoyed the video. This will be probably more to come. Thanks.